So anyways, after the events of the last few, last few interesting wars, let's just put it that way, it seems like we have a bit of an international crisis over the Peloponnese. Now, this is a bit of a problem. The reason this is a massive problem is that I don't particularly want to get into another massive war right now. And especially if in the international crisis every great power can join. So if the Russians and the French and, you know, someone else, maybe even Germany, decide to join Greece, shit's not good, effectively. And so yeah, I'm just looking for a solution, but we might have to cave in and just give the fucking Peloponnese to Greece. Now, we have been safekeeping Peloponnese and, sorry, not Peloponnese, safekeeping Greece for essentially our conquest for a while, but we never had the infamy, and so this has come back to bite us, obviously. There must be some kind of bonus that the game gives, or modifier that the game gives to, and of course the Austria-Hungary decides to join the French Republic. There must be some modifier that the game gives to the northern Greek and Macedonian area. So as you can see, like, they're already like offering people basically war goals to join. It's the way the crisis system works is kind of weird, and so I'm just like, and there are also like the French want to acquire Oran, so they want to take back their colonies, which is just hilarious, by the way, because like the crisis system is supposed to be like, oh, you know, like this poor oppressed nation wants great power help to restore itself and its territory, and it's like, in the crisis negotiations, the French are like, give me back my colony. Which just screams self-determination of the peoples, you know. So anyways, I can just like end this by giving Greece the Peloponnese. And as I said, we've been safekeeping Greece with 100% sphere points this entire time. And so I'm like, whatever, I don't care anymore. So I give up on the Greece stuff. Especially because once we lower our infamy enough, we can go after a much better prize, which is Persia. As you can see, there's a nice little state that's Hafaz, and can invent all these things. And Ahvaz, once people start to discover things like cars and airplanes and, you know, oil-driven ships, and oil-driven ships, people start to discover oil around the world, and Ahvaz just so happens to be, well, the place historically, I believe, where like the first oil in the Middle East was discovered, where the whole Anglo-Persian oil company thing happens. Okay, cutting forward, we are in a stupid war over God knows what with the Netherlands and Germany, and of course, they're fucking invading. They're fucking invading Bosnia. This is like, what, the 4th invasion of Bosnia by like a random European nation that has no business being in Bosnia. Of course, so we're gonna have to deal with that. Thankfully, the Dutch do decide to suicide themselves on our troops so that we can pretty easily go in and encircle them, essentially. Now, our army has grown a shitload. I'm not sure if I've already clicked the button that makes armies of states like ours, which means basically states that have a lot of colonial states, a lot of colonies, sorry. Really, really good. Which is the Reform the Colonial Army decision. I'm not sure if I have that yet, but basically that is what allows the Ottoman Empire to have a really, really amazing army, because they can conscript more of the natives or whatever. Now that's an interesting topic of conversation in and of itself because of how, like, essentially the Ottoman Empire treated its minorities, which is to say that it left them a lot of autonomy, actually. Like, compared to European states at around this period, like, for example, France. Well, I'm talking about this period, actually. More like when the Ottoman Empire was really forming, which is the 15th, 16th century. Compared to rising European states like France, the Ottoman Empire was actually very lenient on its subgroups that it was sort of hegemonizing control over. So that means, you know, religious minorities, ethnic minorities. In fact, some historians basically call the empire something called a negotiated state, by which it means that the ruling elite essentially co-opted groups to join it. Now, what the fuck are the French doing? The French are just taking over all the world, pretty much. They've been doing like 7 wars, because why the hell not? Yeah, basically something called a negotiated state, which basically is supposed to mean that... What the fuck am I doing? No, don't do that. Supposed to mean that the state is hegemonizing control over all these groups and sort of co-opting them into the elite, rather than directly sidelining these elites and trying to basically dominate its territory exclusively. So the Ottoman Empire was kind of a cohabitation of a lot of institutions, not just basically what the empire was on its official scale, but also a lot of local rulership, a lot of local religious councils, and a lot of, you know, ethnic groups that essentially governed their own affairs and minded their own business. And this, according to some historians, explains why the Ottoman Empire, for example, had a very low amount of sort of ethnic or religious-based peasant uprisings compared to, for example, even some European states that were obviously a lot less ethnically diverse, a lot less even, like, extensive in terms of land area, so a lot easier to administer. Also, of course, the Germans have decided to go the long way around and invade me in the Caucasus, because why the hell not? And yeah, so, like, basically, you look at countries like Russia, you know, when they become stronger and more powerful, they have to face a shitload of revolts from the groups that they're essentially taking over, which is exactly what you'd expect. The Ottoman Empire almost inexplicably doesn't have as much of that as all the others. And again, the whole, you know, negotiated state kind of half autonomy deal is what a lot of historians propose as an answer. Anyway, of course, the Germans decide that they're gonna send, like, all their armies. The Germans are always annoying to deal with in Victoria too, because their generals, I'm not sure what the fuck is up with them, but they always get the best generals, and so they have a ridiculous advantage in combat. Also, their stupid tech, I don't even know what you call it, like tech school. Yeah, I think tech school. Their stupid tech school is really strong, and so they're always, like, essentially, they've always got the best military tech. So this is why the Germans are, like, ridiculously strong in Victoria too, because they're, like, blah 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 blah. And that's just something that angers me, because it's not a problem if I'm, like, Russia or France, because I'm, like, expecting to fight these guys, but even if I'm, like, playing some random Middle Eastern or Asian country, there has to be always at least one German invasion, and I hate it. I fucking hate it. So anyway, the Germans have decided to send a good quarter or whatever of their army to a random mountainous shithole in the Eastern Ottoman Empire. Sorry, Armenian viewers, I just insulted you. I am now on a Dashnak kill list. And of course, even though I'm smashing them, white peace. If we refuse this, we're gonna like lose prestige and, you know, get... apparently this war is caused by the United Kingdom. Oh, and of course, as soon as we are at peace, we get an event called the Ottoman Protectorate, which is the same as, if you remember, the Tunisian one. So obviously, that means that Morocco was in the sphere of the Ottoman Empire, and we just get to take them. Just take Morocco. Okay, pretty good. Pretty good deal. So now our borders look pretty sexy, which is always like the #1 thing to do in all Paradox games, is to make your borders look sexy and thick, as some people would describe them. Alliance with the People's Republic of Italy. Of course, Italy had a communist revolution. And now we get a Somali protectorate over Warsangali. The Secret Intelligence Agency of Somaliland now wants to kill me because I called Berbera a Somali place. Whatever. So now that I realize that this can be the case, now unfortunately this is giving us like free infamy every time, but as you can see I also have, you know, full sphere status on Ethiopia, and I just get Ethiopia. Ottoman Ethiopia, why the hell not? Why the Ethiopian emperor would submit to that, us, I have no idea, but also we get Geledi, and I want to get Warsangali as well, you know, to finish off our good old Eastern Africa. And, what? A crisis, just ended with the Solomon Islands being exchanged? Interesting. Very, very interesting. That good old time when the Solomon Islands causes essentially a world war. Now, there's also another problem. There's apparently an Algerian revolt of some kind. We get the colonial incident. I'm not sure why I decided to not attack France over the colonial incident. Because, like, okay, what I'm thinking, I think, is that I don't want to interfere with this clearly, like, event war between Algeria and France. Now, France can't really reach Algeria. Although, maybe, perhaps they could, like, send troops through the desert or something. But, like, I could have attacked France and taken another colony. I don't know. My whole thing is that I want Algeria to be free so that I can sphere them, and I'm hoping that there's the event to integrate Algeria into the Ottoman Empire, just like with Morocco and Tunisia. Anyways, another stupid war with Italy over Venezia, and of course we're obliged to join our good ally, even though they're a bunch of commie pinkos, to you know, protect Ottoman interests in the Mediterranean or whatever. So, yet another war of Austria-Hungary when I was preparing to fight Russia, as you saw by my army deployment status. And so, yet another, like the 6th for an invasion of Bosnia. And of course now, as you can see, that we have, because we have Ethiopia, this is really, really great, because we have a crap load of populations that we can enslave, recruit into our army. So that's going to allow us to build 1 or 2 more full stacks of troops. And that's just, you know, pretty good. That's like a, it's a feels good man if I ever see one. Oh, and we've also built a pretty cool navy, not gonna lie. Pretty epic Ottoman navy, and we're gonna avenge the Battle of Lepanto or whatever, and sink a bunch of Austrians, along with Italy. Although, I suppose if Italy is on our side, it's not really avenging the Battle of Lepanto, but whatever. Battle of Lepanto, in case you don't know, is like basically when Venice and Spain basically, like, the Pope brokered an alliance between, like, Venice, Spain, and a few other Mediterranean Christian powers to basically yeet on the Ottoman fleet, which was doing a whole bunch of, like, piracy stuff in the Mediterranean. and smashed them pretty fucking hard. And yeah, it's like in Italian history textbooks, obviously since like Italy had a large participation in this battle and wider essentially conflict that was going on between the Ottomans and a lot of Christian Mediterranean powers in the basically early 17th century. This is pretty much blown out of proportion, and well, I'm assuming blown out of proportion. Again, I'm not like really that much of an expert on Ottoman history, but it's sort of sold as this like, oh yes, without this happening, like the Ottoman Empire would have never collapsed or something like that. Which I'm like, looking back, like obviously when I'm a teenager. War of Russian control over the Emirate of Bukhara. It's the 6th Russo-Turkish war in this playthrough. Amazing. So I was already fighting Austria-Hungary. This is not like the greatest thing for our northern frontier, because I sent all the troops that were guarding the Russian portions west. Anyway, despite all of that, like looking back at like teenage me looking at the history textbook, because like, okay, story time. Like a lot of the time I was obviously like a history nerd or whatever. I already played grand strategy games or whatever and all that. I was already edgy in this regard, but like, so I'm bored in class, nothing's going on. Maybe it's like an English class and I don't need to learn English because I know English. And like, so 17-year-old me goes like, okay, I'm just gonna like, you know, read a bit of my history textbook because I enjoy that. I already see that some things are off, you know, but like, I don't really know to like pick up a good book on this stuff. Anyway, looking back and like reading some things, I'm like, okay, it was pretty obvious that this was bullshit. Like especially a lot of things on Russia were not like that good. It relied on a lot of bad history, and let's not even talk about China. Basically, like in 2 paragraphs, it tries to explain like the entire, you know, thousands of years of Chinese history before essentially the Opium War, and obviously fails at that, and then basically fails at explaining the 100 years afterwards in a single chapter. I say fails because it's impossible, not even because it's like that terrible. You know, what it says is basically correct, but like it's impossible to explain 100 years of that in a single chapter. But obviously there's no space for Chinese history in like an Italian history class in high school, and so obviously, you know, that's that. So rant aside, the Ottoman portions of the textbooks were, I'm guessing, pretty much like the Chinese parts of the textbooks. Perhaps a little bit better, because there was obviously a lot more about the Ottoman Empire with like, you know, 1453 and all that. It's slightly more relevant to European history than China is. But still, I'm guessing that like a lot of bias went in it, and so every time like Italians are involved, obviously it's gonna blow the part that Italians played in the downfall of the Ottoman Empire, or the stagnation of the Ottoman Empire, way out of proportion. Anyway, rant fucking over. I do like how much I'm going in depth though. So yeah, right now our war situation is not good. I'm just basically trying to survive, really, because I know that the Russians, if they're allowed, even though we weaken them like a lot, I know that if the Russians are allowed to cross essentially the northern Romania front and head into Bulgaria and you know, into the plains region, essentially in the Danube part of our empire, shit's gonna be bad. And so I'm just desperately trying to hold them at the pass. If the Austrians gain an advantage, whatever, I don't give a shit. So I just care that the Russians don't, you know, cross. And of course, as soon as I commit all of my troops, the Russians are flanking me from the west, and so I'm just hoping that my currently mobilizing troops are enough to stop them. And yeah, just trying to survive that way. Now, the Italians, thankfully, are doing okay, like, because the Austrians have sent a pretty good portion of their army against us, thankfully. But you see that's causing problems for us, which is allowing Italy to do their part, which is good, because this is like the liberation of Veneto or Venetian or whatever. So if the Italians do well on their side, we're going to have ticking war score. However, the problem is still Le Rus, you know, the Ruskies. The Ruskies are fighting the war over Bukhara, and so obviously this is like it's one of those ridiculous wars about Central Asia. And right now, the situation at the front is not good. My armies are being collapsed upon from multiple angles, and so the priority really is to survive, to not lose my entire army. Now, it does not really matter if the Russians take over Bukhara, but if the Russians are fighting wars over Bukhara, they're not fighting wars over Iran, and if they're not fighting wars over Iran, they're not fighting wars over fucking Eastern Anatolia. And if they're not fighting wars over Eastern Anatolia, they're not fighting wars over Bulgaria. And if they're not fighting wars over Bulgaria, they're not fighting wars over Constantinople. Basically, a bit of a domino effect is going into my thinking. Yeah, I don't want the Ruskies being essentially able to do whatever evil Russians do. Do whatever it is that evil Russians do all the time in history. Anyway, it's still lovely that they attack me in the eastern region so that I can just smash them in the mountains. And yeah, I'm kind of behind on my military tech, which is what is allowing the Ruskies to do so well. But I've still got the terrain advantage on my side, and really even like numbers. Like obviously the Ruskies aren't short on numbers, and the Austro-Hungarians aren't short on numbers either, but you know, the Ottoman Empire also pretty big. So yeah, basically trying to stop them with bodies.